And that was a huge aha moment for me because it was hard, right? And this is the crazy thing. So these two boys who are linked, right? Bodhi would not be alive if William hadn't died, right? So they're forever linked. And so how do you hold both? How can I be happy to have a new son when I know that the only reason he's here is because I lost my other son? It's someone who's overly rational. Try to rationalize that's impossible. And so I finally got to a place where you got to stop trying to, it can't be an either or, it's an and. You can be both thrilled that you have this new beautiful baby, but also still devastated that you lost your son. And it was only at that moment, and I have a line in my poem, the only way forward is to call a truce and bring peace within. Those two things need to coexist. There needs to be a truce between those two things in order for you to just have any sense of calm and peace inside.
When I read My Teacher, My Son, it brought tears to my eyes often, and in some parts I cried. Yes, the story of 9-year-old William is heartbreaking. Though as much as it is heartbreaking, it is also truly inspiring. My guest today on The Beautiful Side of Grief, and the author of this book, is William's dad, Nick Shaw. Nick went deep with the tragic loss of William, and what emerged was a beautiful vulnerability with learnings full of heart and love. That's what made me cry. This is the story of Nick learning from William and how to face the task of going from a family of 4 to 3, then eventually back up to 4 again, of facing his own emotions in the darkness, light, love, and loss, and giving those emotions meaning, like what it to have a stranger embrace him in the worst moments of his life, the role his wife took when he couldn't, the grace of understanding it was an accident and not anyone's fault, having community rally around, understanding the nature of his dad's love, and living his life by the 4 W's, what William would want. It is a privilege to be chatting to Nick today, and I hope to tap in on his wisdom of this journey, plus his expertise as an executive coach of adapting to change, sudden or gradual. In the darkness, we can be the light that shines, maybe hesitant and wavering at first, to emerge as a strong beam to guide others. In my mind, this is what Nick has done. So welcome to The Beautiful Side of Grief, Nick.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very, very happy to be with you today in New Zealand time and this evening in Massachusetts time.
I know. I was getting a bit worried about whether the daylight savings thing would affect us, but we managed to get through all of that. So it's wonderful to be speaking with you. Now, I often start our conversations off by asking, what is one of your favorite memories of William?
Wow. My favorite memories of William, one of the things William loved to do was he was such a lover, right? That was just kind of his nature. He was a very sensitive and loving boy. And he always used to just love to give people big bear hugs, squeeze you so tight. He was a skinny kid, but you could just feel him squeezing you with this bony little body and just loving you. Like you could just feel the love come through him. And he'd have this big smile. He had these big sort of kind of buck teeth and this big head of curly blonde hair. And yeah, I mean, he just knew he was so happy to see you and be with you. And yeah, it was the most welcoming thing in the world.
And I bet that gives you so much joy now as you sort of reflect on that, remember that, and whenever you just, are in that moment. And you also had an incredible picture in your book of the photo that you used at his service. Oh my gosh. Oh, that just shows what a gorgeous soul he is. Like that just spoke volumes to me, that picture.
Yeah, it's a beautiful picture. And and as I talk about in my book, it's the photo we had up at the service, and all I could focus on during the funeral was him just looking into my soul. It was I just couldn't take my eyes off him.
I know. I have a screenshot of my daughter, and she's got eyes like that too. And whenever I pick it up, it's like she's looking straight at me. I'm going, Yeah, it gets you. Hey, Nick, are you able to give us a glimpse into what your life was like before William's accident?
Yeah, sure. So, my life is, by all measures, was going great. I mean, I lived in this beautiful town in rural Massachusetts, Carlisle, Massachusetts. We had our dream home. I had these two beautiful boys, William and his little brother Kai. My career was progressing along at the right clip. I was a partner at an executive coaching and leadership development firm. Busy, I was very much focused on my career, and because that's the stage of life I was in. And yeah, life again seemed like it couldn't be going better. We're happy. The boys were getting older. They were getting a little bit more independent, which was nice. We were kind of getting out of that stage of life where we had to really take care of them 24/7. Yeah, so it was really sort of a bit of a storybook life, and we were all happy.
Yeah. And then 2007, 2019 it was, wasn't it? When William
Yeah.
had his accident. So can you take us through what happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a family of skiers. I grew up skiing, and it's really a passion of mine. And William had sort of adopted that passion. He was a good skier. He skied on the local ski race team, and so every time in February we'd start a school vacation, and we went out to on a ski vacation to Big Sky, Montana, out in the Rocky Mountains, and started out like any other day, a beautiful day. The conditions were perfect. Kids were going to do ski school in the morning, and then I would meet up with William, and we were going to go with our friends to ski at the top of the mountain, which is something that he'd wanted to do. We went to Big Sky the year before. We didn't make it we just, something happened, never made it that year. So we were very eager to get up there, and William was going to test his mettle on sort of the top of the mountain, the toughest part of the mountain. And he did great. He skied like I'd never seen him ski before. So for me, it was this ultimate moment of fatherly pride, doing the thing I love most with my oldest son, and he was loving it. And he was doing great. I had the whole thing videoed. I had a GoPro camera, and everything was going great. And so, we skied for a couple runs, and then had to make it down to the bottom to join up with my wife and my younger son, Kai. And on our way down to the bottom, on something called a catwalk, which is effectively a pretty flat road to the bottom of the mountain. We kind of had gotten lost and somehow found ourselves there. And so fine, we were just kind of gliding along, and I was about 10 or so feet in front of him because I'm heavier than him. So the momentum of my weight carried me farther, and everything was great. And we were about 5 minutes from the bottom of the mountain. I was even on my phone telling my wife, we'll be there. And then all of a sudden a skier came skiing past me and said, "Hey, was that your kid who went into the woods?" Because off the side of this catwalk, this road was an embankment with trees and deep powder snow. And I kind of said, "Oh no." So I stopped. I took my skis off and started walking up the hill, expecting to find William stuck in the powder snow off the side of the slope. But when I got up there, he was nowhere to be found. And it's like he just disappeared. And so I tried to go search for him in the woods, but it was very deep powder and quite treacherous. So eventually I had to make my way back to my skis, and finally somebody was able to flag somebody down, and then we were able to call ski patrol, and then a search ensued, and eventually they found him, and then they tried to, they brought him to the ski patrol clinic, but he died on impact. Fortunately he didn't suffer. And that's unfortunately how the day ended.
Yeah, I know. The best and worst, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
you saw him skiing this magnificent run and full of pride, and then in the next instant, all that was shattered. Nick, you made the decision to take 6 months leave from work to help yourself and your family deal with no longer having William with you. Most people would either welcome the distraction of heading back into work, or have no choice to return to work, Take us through why you felt you needed that time and how it helped you all.
Yeah. So first of all, I feel for those people who can't afford to take the time off work after these situations. It's, I think time is an important element that we need to sort of separate and just process everything. So I was fortunate to be able to take the time off. My work is I'm an executive coach. I work with people trying to help them through their own challenges. And I just couldn't do that in the state I was in. It just wasn't possible. So if I wasn't going to be able to be of help to my clients, the best thing for me to do is just to step away. And, my partners were quite They were great. They really accommodated me, and they said, look, take all the time you need. There's room for you when you come back. And it was a tough decision for me because, to your point, I was living in a world of structure and routine, and losing that or putting that to the side was another piece of sort of instability to my life. But I don't know, my instincts just told me it's what I needed to do. And it was tough at first to have no schedule, to be sort of literally on my own, trying to process everything. And my wife is around, and my younger son Kai is around, but it was hard at first because, again, without a routine, without something to structure my days, I was a bit lost. But in the end, it was the best possible thing I could have done, because it allowed me to process my grief in my own way, and also it allowed us as a family to figure out how to be a family of three, because going from a family of four to a family of three is extremely destabilizing.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely get that. So, taking that time, how did that help your family out? What were some of the key things that it enabled you to do?
As a family, I think one of the things we had an instinct to do was to just travel and get out of our home. On the one hand, our home was a source of comfort. On the other hand, the reminders were just constant, right? William's room was empty. William and Kai were 2.5 years apart. Mm-hmm. So anybody who has children who are 2.5 years apart know that the house is constantly alive with their noises, their laughs, their bickering, their cries, whatever it is. And the house was just definitely silent. And it was brutal. So we decided, look, we need to just take moments to just go and visit friends and change the scenery, and also to try to bring some new memories and joy into Kai's life. Mm-hmm. So that's what we did. We traveled, we visited friends in different parts of the country, and for just short trips, we would go for like maybe a week and then come back. And that was really helpful because, like I said, it allowed us to find this rhythm of being a family of three.
You write in your book about the time that Kai was, when you actually went to tell Kai, and he was playing a game with some friends of yours, their children, and then you and your wife took him to another room and you broke the news to him. And then he just looked at you both and then went back to playing again. So at his age, he was 6 years old, right? Yeah. So how did you then work out what he needed
we sought
to
help.
deal?
Yeah, we sought help. I mean, we one of the things we also were pretty resolved to do is expend any resources necessary to get the support we needed. Mm-hmm. So we sought help from a family therapist. So the three of us went to this therapist, and she's an expert in child psychology. So we would go see her, once every 2 or 3 weeks. We also joined an unbelievable grief group here in Massachusetts called Jeff's Place. And what they do is they have different, depending on the situation of loss, they had a group just for families who'd lost a child who have surviving siblings. So we were able to be in a room with people who knew exactly what we were going through, where the kids knew exactly what we were going through. And that was just a wonderful support system for us, because we would all start as a big group, but then the parents would stay together and then the kids would go off and do their own thing to help them process what they were going through. So yeah, we did whatever we could to get help. Yeah,
well, that's a great resource to have. And I would highly recommend that to anybody who loses a child. Trying to do it on your own is so tough. And to reach out and have others help you navigate this. It doesn't matter how much you read until you're in that situation. You just don't know. And you're numb yourself. You're trying to get yourself together, let alone trying to help everybody else get it together. Yeah.
Absolutely. And look, losing a child is not that common in this modern, at least in most modern societies, it's not that common. And so you feel very alone, right? I mean, I say, well, you're an outlier, right? So you need to be in a room with people who know and who are like you, who are part of the club. I like to say no one ever wants to join, because there's the saying, misery loves company. And that's true in this situation. You need to be around people who get and can truly feel what you're feeling. Yeah. Yeah. And it's the Nameless Club, isn't it? When I read that, when you were questioning that, I was going, so did I. Yeah. I went, how come there's a name for if you lose a partner or if you have no parents, but there is no name for people who lose a child? And yeah, it's weird. I don't know why. Yeah.
And the other
It's
thing I
good.
really struggled with was, so what am I now? Am I still a mum? Because I didn't have any other children. So it was trying to
Yeah.
work out how I fit into that whole equation as well. So, yeah, that was my personal experience. Can you take us through some of the other key learnings that William gifted you through this experience? Because really, you have some beautiful, beautiful insights.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the biggest one I take from William, um, I'll give a bit of the backstory before I share the actual story, but
Yeah.
William grappled with anxiety. And I think right around the age of 7, we noticed it. And then we decided to send him to therapy. And after about a year of therapy, he really started coming into his own. And my wife would take the boys to a Unitarian church in our town, and they had this great programming for children. And I think it was right before his 8th birthday, they did an exercise. They said, well, declare a mantra for the coming year. And what William wrote in bright red marker on a note card, and his mantra was, be yourself.
Wow.
Be yourself. I mean, it's still an unbelievable thing when I think about it. A not even year old boy makes that declaration and then proceeds to live it. Because in that next year of his life, his 8th year and into his 9th year, he was really just coming into his own. He'd found sort of his interests, and you could just feel him changing. And that to me is the biggest thing he left me with. And it's a big part of why I wrote the book. And my wife started a not-for-profit called the Williams Be Yourself Challenge. Too many people in this world struggle with that, being themselves. And it's a shame because this one life we have doesn't last forever. And if there's anything we should all be afforded, it's the privilege of being ourselves, right? Whatever that means for you. So that is the biggest thing I take away. And that's a message I will continue to put into the world.
Because that is something you yourself struggled with, wasn't it? Being yourself
Yeah.
and I guess that's allows you to work at that all the time, because I don't think you automatically just transition from your old self with all your self-belief systems suddenly into this new person able to be yourself. I think it's a journey.
Absolutely. It's not a flip of the switch. As adults, we carry a lot of baggage, so to speak, and narratives and limiting and whatever our history is. It's a work in progress. And I think that's what this life is about, where I say we're all works in progress, right? And I'm still working at it. So, yeah.
Yeah. So during this time you took off, you also read Viktor Frankl's book, The Meaning of Life. Yeah. What perspective did that give you?
I mean, first of all, he was an amazing man. And just even before he went through the Holocaust, he was a therapist and did a lot of great work. And then the insights he gained from just the human condition and how we can really control how we want to show up and what our attitudes are towards any situation were amazing, right?
Yeah.
And really, if there's one thing that losing a child has taught me is that we don't control much in this life we live. There's things that happen that are way beyond our control, and despite our best efforts, things will happen. But the one thing we can control, which is the key message I took from Viktor Frankl, is we can control how we react, how we choose to show up, even in the face of the most awful tragedies known to man. So that was a huge kind of inspiration for me to kind of work through my grief.
You're also a person who is introverted. You like your alone time. And I'm interested because this book, every chapter, you share one of the poems that you wrote that relates directly to that chapter. Had you been into poetry prior to losing William? Is that something that came from loss? Because it is beautiful poetry.
Yeah, it's a good question. The answer is no. I don't think I'd written a poem since I was in like grade school when you first learn about what poems are. And I've been thinking a lot about this because no, I hadn't written poetry. I'd never written poetry. And, when you face this kind of loss, you're cracked open, right? And everything inside you, all the good, the bad, the ugly, right? It's just in front of you like this soupy mess that you have to just be with. And your first instincts are not, you don't want to go there because it's way too painful. But eventually, at least for me, I found that the only way I was going to honor William and everything that happened was to go there and actually try to work through it all. And one day, just sitting in the couch in my office, I was reflecting on all the acts of love that were surrounding us amidst this tragedy, from our family, our community, everything, right? And I honestly, I don't know why I was, why it happened, but I just wrote a poem called Love Manifest. It's one of the poems in my book. And so love inspired me to write a poem. I think what happened when you are able to get through all the negative stuff when you're cracked open, you can then tap into maybe something within yourself that maybe you didn't know existed. And for me, that was the inner poet. And so that's where that came from.
Are you still writing poetry now?
Not right now, no. I mean, it's funny. I've been thinking about that because I've been so focused on finishing the book and then everything that comes with publishing a book. But it's something I want to get back to because I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was such a great outlet for me as an introvert, and as also someone who hasn't always been very open with his emotions and feelings. It was the perfect medium for me to let that stuff out.
And I like your style too, because you actually capture so much in very few words. And that's a difficult thing to do. Truly.
Yeah, it's I guess it's definitely one of my characteristics. I tend to be short and to the point in most of the things I do, at least when I'm talking. But yeah, so I'm glad you like that style, because if that's what you just get to the heart of the matter.
Yeah. So working through it all, as you just mentioned, that's part of the work that you do with your clients as an executive coach, isn't it? So can you just take us through the change process? Because that is also something that you deal a lot with your own clients. And then you had to face that yourself, like that whole realization that you were no longer a family of four. So can you just guide us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think change is difficult no matter what the change is. Obviously, profound loss like we've experienced, obviously there's so much involved in that. It's a massive thing that can happen in someone's life. I think it's natural human nature to resist change, right? Because I think as a species, we survive by creating predictability in our lives.
Yeah.
And anything that destabilizes that is a threat to that, right? So our natural instincts are always to resist it. But eventually there comes a point where you can't, right? And particularly when you lose someone, there's no going back. It's pretty black and white at that point.
Pretty final.
Yeah, it's about as final as it gets. And I think, look, we all go through a mental calculation for not necessarily the type of loss we had, but I think in any change situation other than death, we all go through a calculation that says, well, is the cost of the change greater than the cost of staying the same? Then I'm going to stay the same because it's too much of an effort to change. It's not worth it. But if the inverse is true, then maybe I'll change. So I think anybody needs to realize what does this change mean for me, and why is it important for me to change? What I call the case for change, right? If you can't rationalize or come to grips with what the case for change is, then you're never going to do it. And once you can define what that change means for you, then I think then you have to be committed to actually doing the work to actually change. And that's a lot of the work I do with my clients, is helping them define what the case for change is, and then define what that change means for them specifically, and then identify what are the commitments and actions they're going to make to actually make the change.
And you also examined what the purpose of your life is. Mm-hmm. And you were quite surprised by what came up with that word.
Yeah. So and that, it's funny that actually happened, I think, probably a couple of years before the accident, but it obviously has served me a lot. Mm. I was working, my mentor, I was talking to him and he was coaching me, mentoring me, and I was trying to figure out what my life purpose was, which is, I think, a question that many people have. And my mentor is very much into Buddhism and Eastern philosophy, and he's a big meditator. And I'd started meditating a little bit. He said, well, just meditate on it. Just meditate. And once you get into that state, just pose the question, what's my purpose? And then he said, pose it, listen for a couple breaths, and pose it again, and just listen, wait for what happens. And so I did that, a bit skeptical at first. Then eventually I thought initially the purpose was going to be related to my work, right? My clients.
Yes.
But what came up was my two most important clients, which at the time were my two sons. And so I needed to learn. And so my purpose is I need to learn so I can teach. And it's really, I need to learn so I can teach these two little boys how to be good human beings in the world. And so that's my purpose. And that extends to beyond my children, but it's learning so I can teach, learning through my own life experiences so I can then help others grapple with whatever they're grappling with.
Nick, another one of the most beautiful things that can emerge when you lose somebody is experiencing the true power of human spirit and love. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I experienced that in spades. I mean, you experience acts of love and when you, with your family and things like that, but to see it from strangers, from your community, to feel that they are empathizing with you and feeling your pain, I mean, that's real connection. That's like the most connected you can be to another human being. That was really just amazing. And that's why that's the first poem I wrote, was Love Manifest, because it was just manifesting for me in so many different ways with my friends, my family, my parents. Yeah. And, it in some ways, there's hope, right? That the human spirit can be alive and well, even amidst all the craziness that goes on in our world. If we could just remember that we're all just human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a mantra I was doing the other day that was saying, I make true connections when my heart touches another heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's it, isn't it? That's the essence of life, why we're here. It's the connections we make for others. You can take away everything. I know people that have recently suffered the loss of their homes through dreadful weather events. So none of that is guaranteed. But what you do have around you is your immediate support group, and then those others, strangers that, just open their hearts up and they'll just show you so much love. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing of that. So I also want to talk to you, and I hope you're okay with talking about this, is that really deep yearning that we have when we lose somebody, because I went through this myself. When you lose somebody so precious to you, your immediate instinct is just to want to be there with them. And I know you felt that. I know I felt that. What I would love to understand is how you dealt with that, because it's different from wanting to take your life. That's a whole different thing. This is different. This is on another level, isn't it? And so do you want to just take us through what you experienced around that?
Absolutely. So I had that instinct on several occasions. Obviously, the night of, I had that instinct because the pain was so acute the night of, and all you want is just to be with that person you lost. And then I had it other times when I felt like I just felt hopeless, right? That this life was just never going to be the same again. And that was way too painful to try to conceive of. Right. And so, I thought I definitely had those thoughts on a number of different occasions. I think two things got me away from those thoughts. And actually both of those things were, it was William and it was Kai, and I'll talk about each differently. But when I was in that dark moment, again, when this is sort of after when we gotten back home, and I was really thinking, God, it's not worth it. I was there. And I don't know why, but that this sort of faint something was in the background, this sort of a little ray of light or something. And then this sort of mantra just came to me, what would Willie want? What would William want?
Yeah.
And, if I were to have done something silly like taking my own life, then that's not what he would have wanted.
No.
William wouldn't have wanted me to do that. He wouldn't have wanted to create more suffering for my wife and for his little brother, Kai. He would have wanted us to honor him. And so that was a huge sort of reframing of everything. Like I need to, that was the sort of the early stages of this book, right? That was one. The other one was Kai, my younger son. And I had to, both my wife and we had that look in the eye moment of where we are going to make it through this thing because we have Kai and we are going to keep our family intact. And so we had that resolution to just do whatever it took. So yeah, I think both William and Kai were sort of pulled me out of that very dark place.
Mm. Now you have another addition to your family, little Bodhi. And
little Bodhi, yeah.
Yeah. And so how has life changed going back to a family of 4? Because I think you think that it's automatically going to take things back to the way they were. And you're excited about having Bodhi, but there's still somebody missing from that equation, isn't there? And it's reconciling yourself to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny because that was so I call it maybe 3, 4, 5 months after William died. Both my siblings, my older sister and my twin brother, were like, "You can have another child?" I was like, "Have another child?" I was like, "Are you kidding me?" I think I was 43 when William died. I mean, I was past that point in my life, and I honestly, I raised 2 boys. I got them past those initial stages of, being babies and toddlers, and I was happy to be past that, to be perfectly honest with you. I was, again, I wanted to do things with my kids and be, and so I was pretty resistant to it, but eventually I came around. And then so we had Bodhi, and we were pretty clear that this is not about replacing William. This is about bringing balance to our family. It's about providing a sibling for Kai.
Mm.
But it was hard. It was hard initially. For me, it was very hard. Again, I was, I'd lost my 9-year-old son, and now I had this inconsolable crying baby
Screaming baby,
with, right? Screaming baby. And it was like, anyone who's a parent knows those are hard. Just having a baby's hard. And so having a baby when you're still grieving the loss of your other son was extremely hard. And it's not where I wanted to be. And it took me a while, and, I had to have some pretty serious conversations with my wife. And I have to say, he's an amazing little boy. I love Bodhi, and and it's still a process to try to love and also and miss William, right?
And I love what you say, that those 2 things can exist together.
Yeah, that was a huge aha moment for me because it was hard, right? And this is the crazy thing. So, these 2 boys who are linked, right? Bodhi would not be alive if William hadn't died, right? So they're forever linked. And so how do you hold both? How can I be happy to have a new son when I know that the only reason he's here is because I lost my other son? It's someone who's overly rational. Try to rationalize that's impossible. And so I finally got to a place where you got to stop trying to, it can't be an either or, it's an and. You can be both thrilled that you have this new beautiful baby, but also still devastated that you lost your son. And it was only at that moment, and I have a line in my poem, the only way forward is to call a truce and bring peace within. Those 2 things need to coexist. There needs to be a truce between those 2 things in order for you to just have any sense of calm and peace inside.
Yeah, let the resistance go. Yeah, let it just be. That's beautiful. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners about what you've learned from this experience?
Yeah, I think for listeners who are going through their own grief, and this is something I wish someone had told me in those early days, is you're going to grieve however you're going to grieve. I believe to my core that grief is a uniquely personal thing. I call it unique grief. Like my grief is going to be different from my wife's grief, from your grief, from it. And you just have to let your grief unfold how it unfolds. Don't, read too many books, I would say, because they tend to frame things in very nicely, neatly, process. Your grief is your grief, and just be okay with how you're grieving. Be yourself in your grief, I guess is what I would say, because you're already dealing with a lot, and to sort of be overly judgmental and negative about how you're grieving is is not a burden you need to take on. And I took it on, and it was very challenging for a long time until I finally said, look, this is the way I'm going to do it. And this is how I do it. And that's okay. So that to me, I think for anyone who's in the early stages of it, just let your grief manifest how it manifests.
And I love that's how you've written your book too. You've written it from your perspective, so people can read your insights and take from that what they will. You're not telling anybody how to do anything. You're just sharing your journey, what you came up against and how that unfolded for you. And there are some real treasures in there for people to read, because it is a really beautiful book. And I wasn't expecting that, Nick. I don't know what I was expecting, but when I read it and it brought me to tears, there are very few books that do that. So this is something very special that you've created.
Well, that means a lot. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I'd like to wrap up with a couple of questions that I ask everyone. So what is the best thing that has happened to you so far today?
Today? Well, so my book is just released, right? So it's finally getting into the world, which has been pretty, I've been talking about this book for months, and now I've been getting to some beautiful texts from friends, people who are reading it. And I've just been really touched by that, right? The fact they've been sharing the impact that my book has had on them. And that's why I wrote this book. I wanted it to have an impact, and to see that come to life is amazing. It's honestly, it's a bit overwhelming, to be honest with you. I'm still trying to figure out how to hold all the different emotions that come with it. But that's been really special, to just know that my book is touching people, to know that William's legacy is touching people is unbelievable.
That's pretty special. Yeah. What is something that you are most grateful for?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm grateful for my family, for my wife, who's been just an unbelievable partner in this, in everything. And I'm grateful for all three of my sons, William, Kai, and Bodhi. I guess they're the reason I'm doing all this. So,
yeah. And I think that they're pretty proud of you as well, being their dad. When you have moments in your day that are not going so well, and we have a phrase here, when things turn to custard, what's your go-to to pivot out of it?
I think I draw on the what would Willie want, what I call the WWWW mantra. I draw on that quite a bit. That's one. And I also draw on Viktor Frankl's lessons, right? You have to focus on what you can control. I for one know in my past, and even happens today, you get frustrated when you feel like you've lost control. And that just makes things worse. So I try to draw on that, as just to really try to just focus on what I can control, and the rest will be the rest.
I know. Sometimes that's a hard thing to do, isn't it? And especially if you want to go and solve everyone else's problems, you have to, at some stage, recognize that that's their problem. It's got nothing to do with you. I had to learn that.
Yeah, no, it's true. And the instinct is right. You want to be helpful, but at some point, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Nick, I just want to say what an absolute pleasure it is to be speaking to you today. We're going to have all the links in the episode notes, but just share with us now how people can reach you and get hold of this book. And just it's my son, let me go back. My teacher, my son. Yes.
Yeah, my teacher, my son. Yeah. So you can, if you want to learn more about me and sort of a bit of the background of the book, and I have a website called www.meetnickshaw.com. And I have a blog and all the links to any media will be on there. And then the book, you can buy it on Amazon. It's available for purchase now on Amazon. It will be available in other outlets in the coming weeks. But right now, the main place to get it is Amazon.com.
Now, keep embracing that feedback that's going to keep coming to you, because I know this is a wonderful, wonderful book that you've written. It's going to be a wonderful resource for others that are going through a similar journey or perhaps just going through life. I think just going through life, they can get a lot out of this book. And yes, so I am so grateful that we got to have a chat about it today and I got to meet you, and it's great work that you're doing. Keep it up.
Well, thank you. It was awesome to connect with you from halfway across the globe and enjoy our time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you got some real value from this episode. If there's a topic you'd like covered, click on the Beautiful Side of Grief at gmail.com link, or go into the beautifulsideofgrief.com website, where you can also leave a review. To get notified of new episodes, hit the subscribe button. And if you know of somebody who could benefit from this episode, please share. And until next time, please be kind to you and take good care.